Welcome to the Outer Circle Inner Stillness, conversations and reflections on sobriety, spirituality, and how they intersect, and how we heal people, and how we support people in all ranges, walks of life, and all the fun corners of everything. So again, I am Reese Basimio, hailing from the wilds of Gresham, Oregon. It's not actually that wild. There's a little bit of this stereotype that I lived with when I lived like in town in Portland, and they're like, "Oh, dirty Gresham." And then I actually got out to Gresham after 10 years, and I was like, "Actually, this is really cute and really charming and really nice, and the people here are lovely." So all that to say, if you're looking for counseling services out here in Gresham, we're really lovely people out here, and we'd really love to meet you. So I am here with a friend and colleague, Conrad Lipic, and delighted that I get to make your acquaintance with him. That's oddly phrased, but you know what I mean. Anyway, hi, Conrad. How are you?
Hey, doing well, thank you. How are you today?
I'm okay. I'm great. I have caffeine. I'm good. So, yes, speaking of drugs.
Great. I've yet to have my caffeine for the day.
Oh, a true ascetic there, indeed. So would you do the honors of introducing yourself to the listener? Where are you in the world? What's your corner of the counseling field? And other things important to know about you?
Sure. So, Conrad Lipic. I reside in Rapid City, South Dakota. I am both a licensed therapist and also a professional counselor. Professional coach. And I tend to work more on the coaching side than I do the therapy side these days. I found that working more with the person and not the problem tends to have a lot better results. And so I've been doing a lot more coaching these days than I have therapy. I do have my business, Mind Aligned. And so you could go to mindaligned.com and you can find all the information you need about my business, as well as information on the coaching and therapy aspects of it. About myself a little bit is I am a combat veteran. I was in the Army from 2003 to 2007. I was a combat medic with 101st Airborne, deployed to Iraq 2005, 2006. Came back, had some very severe post-traumatic stress that's pretty much dogged me to this day. Went through my own recovery, and that really led me to working with other veterans and other mostly males who identify with problematic sexual behaviors. I found it's a group not many people want to work with. And so my unique background is very well suited to working with this type of population. And I absolutely love it. There's nothing better than seeing my clients come in, their whole life's in shatters, and then by the time they successfully discharge, they're like, hey, my relationship's a lot better, not just with my spouse or with my girlfriend or whoever they're with, but also with myself. And that last part's really what I like hearing, is their relationship with their self is a lot better. I don't know. Anything else you want me to talk about? Or did that pretty much sum it up?
Well, that introduced a whole lot of fun factors right there, and okay. I'm sure I will want to know other things too. But so backing up a brief step. So counseling versus coaching. I know that's common parlance, and we would kind of in our consciousness know that both are out there. Can you say a little bit about what the difference is if somebody's looking for help?
Right. There is a lot of similarity between the two. I mean, if you can do something in therapy, you could pretty much do it in coaching, with the caveat of you are not able to diagnose anything mentally in coaching. So there's no diagnosis of anything. There's no med prescription in coaching, none at all. But also, depending on your level of therapy, you're also not doing med prescription. That's more a psychiatrist, MD. That's not really your LCSWs, LPCs, LMFTs, anything like that. The big difference is I found through lots of training in therapy and coaching is therapy deals more with the problem than the person. And coaching deals a lot more with the person than the problem. And so that's kind of the big difference right there is, are we wanting to focus on the problem at hand, or are we wanting to focus on the person? And I've found typically when we work with the person versus the problem is going to get solved, but there's a lot with the person that we need to really work on in order for everything that's beneath the surface that we're not seeing to be resolved. Oh, and another big thing is insurance companies won't reimburse coaching, but they will typically, not always, but typically reimburse therapy.
Many times, yeah, especially if there's a diagnosis at play.
Correct.
So,
yes.
Which is one of the key reasons why we have to diagnose. Anyway, there's a tangent there.
Oh, preaching to the choir.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And yeah, that take on stepping away from the strictly diagnostic medical model. Hey, there's a problem. Let's fix the problem. More right. Looking at who's this person, what makes them who they are, how do we heal the person? It does seem like there's something like more deeply sustainable about that.
There really is. And I found coming at it from that point of view, it makes them feel more like they're being heard and they're being seen. And it also helps remove a lot of stigma and shame.
Yep. Yeah, no, thank you for that. So little bonus tidbit for the listener who might be looking for some help or guidance of some sort. What's the difference between a counselor and a coach? There's some idea. There's this fun Venn diagram of counselors and coaches and clergy and like good friends and doctors and everything. So we share a lot of the same tools, a lot of the same lingo. We should all be nice and seeing your humanity, but then we can do different things, like we can or cannot prescribe medication or talk theology or something. Right. So there's some specifics. So I'm excited for this. Like what you had said about specific populations. One of my thoughts in coming to this is that something like addiction, compulsive behaviors, acting out, that's an experience that knows no boundaries. It affects all genders, all ages, all races, all socioeconomical statuses. It is highly correlated with trauma, and so that's kind of a thing. But then trauma also doesn't know any boundaries either, because like everybody has trauma. So when we look at and sex addiction, compulsive sexual behavior is right in there with them. So we might say, okay, here's the specific population, armed forces and veterans. Well, yes, of course that they would be experiencing some of these challenges and have their own unique experience of that. And so I think it's great. We get to kind of get to know another population, which admittedly, so I'm civilian. I've always been a civilian. Sometimes I forget about the armed forces because, thank you for your service. You've cultivated this fairly cush life where I kind of don't have to think about these things if I don't want to. Thanks.
Yeah, there are many days where I wish I could say the same as you, but I chose the other path. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes.
We'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah, their story. So maybe if you could say a little bit about what is the prevalence from what you know of addiction, particularly problematic sexual behavior, porn use among active troops or veterans?
Sure. So last I checked, statistic-wise, general population, and prior to like Pornhub and XNXX and all the other, porn websites that have popped up over the last 20 years, it was about 3 to 5% of the population would have fallen under the category of problematic sexual behaviors, sex addiction, compulsive sexual behaviors, however you want to describe it. Internet comes along, porn sites come along. I think the civilian side, it jumped up to 5 to 8% for males. Then you take the military, and it jumps up even more. Army, which is my branch, it's 18% struggle with problematic sexual behaviors. Marine Corps is the next highest, I believe around 15. And then it just drops off for Air Force and Navy. I haven't seen any figures for the Coast Guard or for the Space Force. Space Force is too new for there to really be figures on that. But I do know, if I remember correctly, Navy and Air Force were still above the civilian side or right there at the civilian side. But yeah, I mean, we're looking at 3 times as more prevalent with the military population, especially combat arms, than we are the civilian population. I mean, that right there speaks volumes to me. What I've talked with Shane Krause, who is a researcher over at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, used to be over at Yale. And he was basically saying, in all the research he's done, they are not able to identify, does the military create individuals who have problematic sexual behaviors, or is the military a place where those who actually are experiencing problematic sexual behaviors are drawn? And so they don't know where the correlation is. But then we look at some other research, and they've looked at stroke victims where the left side of the hemisphere will get a lesion from the stroke, and the individual is going to develop hyposexuality. So loss of interest in sex below the normal amount, or below the normal individual. And I hate that word normal, but we got to use it here. Mm-hmm. And then those that have lesions in the right hemisphere have hypersexuality. And so that makes me think, okay, well, with all the traumatic brain injuries that are experienced from roadside bombs, with, all of the concussions that go on, and not to mention all of the post-traumatic stress that happens, and we'll get into that one here in a moment. Is that a factor? Because those are creating microlesions in the brain, and a lot of roadside bombs are on the right side of vehicles. Sure, there are plenty on the left side as well, but is that playing a factor in it? Because we're seeing Army and Marines, they're going to be the ones that experience the bombs more than anybody else, and they're the 2 highest at 15+% of the population with problematic sexual behaviors. And then there's other research that shows combat veterans with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries actually have a larger amygdala, and that helps with that region is key for sex, basically, the desire for it. I mean, it's part of our reptilian brain. We want to have sex. And so with that being triggered, especially with traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress, it's no wonder that this is such a problem in our armed forces. And unfortunately, it's one where a lot of therapists, especially the ones that work either on base or, I know for a fact, the VA, they're like, oh, fuck, we don't want to touch this. We'll refer you out. And they make the individuals feel shame. And I can't tell you the number of veterans that I've talked with that are like, yeah, I've had a really bad experience when I try to get help with this. So yeah, it's really interesting. There's really interesting research coming out on this that we kind of just have to take and say, all right, can we get more research in this area? Because it looks like there's correlation. Now, I can't say with 100% certainty that, yes, those correlations do happen, and that's the reason right there. But I'm leaning towards that direction.
Yeah. I mean, off the cuff, they do seem kind of conspicuous. So just to kind of follow in, so traumatic brain injury plays a big role. And depending on if the injury is on the left or the right side of the brain will affect if a person develops a hyposexuality, so a less desire or some resistance to it, or if the injury is more on the right side of the brain, that will tend to increase the drive for sexual experience, sexual stimulation. And so now being in the military seems very conducive to being injured and traumatic brain injuries. Yeah. Just interesting feature of like, roadside bombs being on the right side. So that makes sense. Yeah. And I can imagine too, where again, part of what we know about addiction in general, sex addiction, also is, it's a response to stress, a response to distress and pain of various sorts, emotional, very prominent in there, and physical pain too. So I can imagine, here's somebody who's who's got a brain injury or is in this really chaotic, really stressful, really life-threatening environment, and just like wanting like soothing of some sort, reaching for whatever's available. And I guess, so are you presenting questions of, does problematic sexual behavior in the military come as a result of these experiences, or is there is it a pre-existing condition that now gets exacerbated?
Right.
What's what is your thought there?
My thought, I would say it's probably a combination, is more where I would put my money if I was a betting man. Luckily, I'm not. The military brings a certain segment of the population to it. And that segment of the population doesn't always have the best coping techniques. But then we look at what the military does. And I'm going from my Army experience, so I'll just speak on that. We're basically trained to kill from day one of basic training. Like, I remember we're on a bayonet course, stabbing tire dummies, yelling kill, and some girl dropped out crying, saying she couldn't do it. And it's like, well, you're pretty much going to get washed out of the Army at this point. So you're trained. You finish basic training. I went to medical school. For combat arms, I was a combat medic. And so, EMT school, guerrilla style medicine, all that fun stuff. You're learning how to save people, but while you're learning to save people, well, you have a whole bunch of usually guys in their late teens, early 20s. So we also go, oh, well, this could be used to kill somebody. That's the military mindset. You get out of training, you go into your unit, it's nothing but training to go to war. And mind you, I was in 2003 to 2007. This was the height of war. And so that's all we did. Day in, day out, trained for it. If you weren't training for war, then, well, there was no then. It's you were training for war. We always had a joke. It's either you could be combat ready and then you wouldn't be parade ready, or you'd be parade ready, but you wouldn't be combat ready. Because to be parade ready, you'd have to, look all nice and neat and everything would have to be perfect, which as soon as you hit combat, that's out the window. Like nothing looks perfect. And so none of our stuff ever looked perfect. And all we did was, okay, go to the firing range. All right, let's talk about how to move in an open field. Let's talk about how to move in the woods. Let's talk about how to move if we're under mortar attack, gunfire, leapfrog, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about killing. What they don't teach you is, okay, we've taught you all this stuff. Now let's work on your mental health. Let's help you come from here with your stress level down to here. Or if we can't get you here, maybe a little bit above that. They didn't do anything like that. And so the military was very much, you're a killing machine. It's what they had to do back then and what they still have to do now. We had no individuals who were embedded in our unit to help with mental health. That's changed from when I've been in, because now there are individuals who are either embedded in units or flux between different units to help with mental health aspect. When I deployed, there was no mental health whatsoever that I was even aware of in our combat area. Came back, and this is after seeing people die in front of me. This is after roadside bombs, gun battles. I mean, all this stuff. And a group of people, and our first sergeant comes up and says, hey, if any of you fuckers tell anybody that there's anything wrong with you, especially mental health, no one's going on leave. And leave is military for vacation. And so as soon as we came back, it was, oh, shit. Well, all right, I'm not going to say anything, and my experience coming back from Iraq, they had us go through a readjustment, and we had to go through all these different stations. And I got to the mental health station, and there was a guy sitting next to me. I sat down, and a couple minutes later, he gets up and walks into one of the stalls that someone just walked out of. And so I moved down one, and some guy sat next to me. And so then a couple minutes later, someone walks out. I walk in there, and the guy's just like, hey, how are you? I'm like, oh, fine. And he's like, do you have any thoughts of killing yourself? And I just started laughing. And I said, and deprive the world of me? I don't think so. So he stopped writing, and he starts laughing. And I'm like, yeah, I know, right? And he goes, okay, you're good, and signs my paperwork and sends me out. And the guy that was sitting next to me goes, what the fuck? And I'm like, I don't know. And so I walked out. That was the only question I was really asked. And it wasn't, are you having panic attacks, anxiety attacks, any of this stuff that I was having? And he just was like, all right, you're good. That was mental health in the military. And they did not really go for trying to make you better mentally. It was trying to beat you down mentally so that you could perform better in a combat zone. Because if you were okay mentally, you're probably not going to perform as effectively as you could if you had some screws loose in your head, basically.
Yeah, because they don't need people, they need weapons.
Exactly. And so then that really translates to, all right, well, we have all of these guys who are primed for, as you said, weapons. And now they have no healthy outlet. They drink, they smoke, they do drugs, they go out having promiscuous sex, they go out looking at pornography, relationships are just destroyed. When I was deployed, they had computer banks set up so people could just jump on a computer, go and talk to loved ones or do whatever they needed to. Every computer, without a doubt, you would click on the web browser, and then it would drop down all the websites that people had accessed. Every computer, bar none, it was porn sites, webcam sites, and just everything along those lines. I mean, just do. I was seeing it when I was deployed. I mean, it was even back then. I don't know anybody who did not use pornography as a way to escape. Now, when we came back, a lot of people didn't use pornography as a way to escape, but there was still a large amount that did, or who used going out random hookups as a way to escape as well.
It was kind of established as this is the way to survive the situation. And even, well, as we know, in trauma brain, just because the situation's over doesn't mean the situation's over.
Right.
Yeah. Because we're still, even in civilian life, encounter stress. And so if the brain's just hyper tuned to stress and trained to have these really big extravagant responses to even little stressors, then yeah, if porn's what does it, then porn's what does it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the common themes is I'll have veterans I talk to, and they're like, man, this wasn't even that bad of a stress, but it just triggered me so fucking bad. And it's like, yeah, it's because I was a little stressor here, but underneath everything, it's a massive jungle of stress that you are carrying. And they're like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. That tends to be one of the challenges that I have with something like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or some of these very logic-based approaches, is because they'll take a situation where it's this small stressor, my kid forgot to take out the garbage. I mean, small sauce, seriously. But logically that is so, but to the stress brain, or to the emotional brain, that small thing becomes symbolic of like all of the big things, or even like a whole lot of small things all at once that have happened, and so it
Right.
amounts to something quite a bit bigger. And so like the logical approach just won't quite connect with that as much as a I could say how I would approach that for my civilian people, but
Yeah.
how do you find is an effective way to connect with a veteran who's just got this huge payload of
Yeah.
stuff?
The logical approach, it works sometimes. Like CBT would work sometimes, but war and combat veterans, there's nothing logical about that. You're, as you had mentioned, you're always on guard. You're always what's going to happen next. There's nothing logical about that. And really just helping break things down and start working with that is what I found to be best. And so it's taking it piecemeal and going, okay, this is going on. All right, let's trace it back. And then what I do is I try to trace it as far back as I can, and then we connect the dots. And it's like, okay, this happened, that caused this, then this, boom. And they're like, oh, okay, now I'm getting that more. But if it was like, oh, hey, yeah, you went to war, so you're experiencing this, the response would be like, yeah, I fucking know. Why am I paying you? I could have told you that. So, and part of my language, it happens. So really working with that the person and trying to really get them back to the core of who they are, because a lot of times it's also a negative core belief that's really, really doing it. And so identifying those core beliefs is key. It's paramount. It's working with that person. Really, that's been the most effective way I've seen, is to go back and do that. I mean, does that help answer the question some? Or because it felt like I was kind of all over the place a little bit as I'm trying to like piece my thoughts together.
Well, that's okay. And even in the way you answer it, kind of feeling all over the place, like I can imagine like stepping into this person's space and having that feeling of like, I feel all over the place because this person probably feels all over the place. And yeah, I mean, what does that feel like to just be all over the place like that?
Right.
But then to be able to recognize that, like, okay, there's a lot of elements flying around. Let's take it one at a time.
Right. And
That
the way I like to describe it to my clients is I'm like, look, you're a puzzle. And we're starting with all the pieces on the table. Some of the pieces are not right side up. Some of the pieces are, flipped around. So what we need to do is we need to flip all the pieces over. We need to sort them out. And then we're going to start putting them together a little bit at a time. And we're going to have small pictures here, small pictures there, small over here, until we finally are able to put everything together and see the overarching picture that is the puzzle of you. And when I describe it that way, it seems to really resonate with them. And they're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
And so it's taking it piece by piece, taking part of who they are, part of who they are, part of who they are, and really going from there.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm sitting with a little bit is how you're talking about going through this training, being trained to be a weapon, being trained to be a killer, and then also noting how like that they're not trained to turn that off, and so that's definitely one challenge. But you're starting with this question of, so does military service like cause or exacerbate problematic sexual behavior, or is it already there ahead of time and that puts the person in that situation? Which feels like a really important question. I guess I'm wondering a little bit more generally, like how does the military change people, like more than just like sexual behavior? Like,
yeah, so basic training is basically meant to take away who you were and build you up to who the military wants you to be. And so like in the Army, it was take away who you were as a civilian, build you up to be part of the Army. And then after basic training, all right, build you up to be, in my case, combat medic. Then I get to my unit, 101st Airborne, and they're like, all right, we're training you to be one of us, one of the 101st Airborne. And that's where I was with the infantry and the Cav Scouts. And it's like, all right, well, yeah, you're an infantry or a Cav Scout person, and you're also our medic. So it really built and built and built and built. So who you were as a civilian, that person's dead and gone by the time you're at your unit. You're no longer that person. And that's no matter what branch of service you're in. I've heard that. Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force. I've heard it from all of them. So that's pretty much what they do as far as breaking you down and building you back up.
Yeah. Kind of a stripping away of the humanity. Like, you're not you anymore. You're this thing. You're this weapon that we've honed to work for us. Yeah. I feel that just feels so heavy. Interesting though, talking about correlations between this and like what happens with the compulsive sexual behavior, compulsive pornographies especially. There's a dehumanizing of a person that goes on there too. Like when I'm looking at a person on the screen or in bed with me or something, and like I don't see their whole story. I don't care about their whole story. I may not even like see their whole body. It's just like, here's this specific aspect of you that's going to, do this specific transaction for me. Like, in a sense, like I'm stripping you of your humanity also. And I don't know, I wonder if you notice a pattern there, or like, is that part of why you think veterans are drawn to like, porn in particular as opposed to like other things, or I don't know. I've got a couple puzzle pieces. What to do with them.
I mean, that's kind of a complicated one. It's, does the military create this person because they stripped everything away, and to kill you got to dehumanize someone. So you're used to dehumanizing someone. As a combat medic, you had to dehumanize people because if you had emotions while you're working on somebody, they're probably going to die because you can't be there crying while you're trying to put on a tourniquet or stop an open air wound. You can't do that. And so it's almost like, does the military cause this, or do the actual individuals who are in the military do this for themselves? I think it's kind of a combination of the two. The military definitely kickstarts it, but then the not reaching out for help exacerbates it. Mm-hmm. But the military also, at least when I was in, it's different these days, but when I was in, it was, you don't ask for help. And prior to my day, it was, you don't ask for help. And it wasn't until probably the 20-teens somewhere that they really started getting mental health people into the units. But shit, most of the horrible fighting was already done by that time. So we're talking millions of Americans who were told, just shut up and put one foot in front of the other and keep going and don't talk about your feelings. And so is it really the fault of the person who's been in the military, the veteran, or is it really the military and our government? So, and that right there is the tricky one, because the government's going to say it's not our fault. It's not our fault, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, we see the VA denying veterans for so many things that they actually have. Like, I myself was denied for post-traumatic stress until recently. And that was, say it's 2023, that was almost 17 years. Actually, yeah, it was like 17 years before they finally acknowledged it. And I've known others who have been denied, and they're like, I'm struggling over here. And not just for mental health, but also for medical issues as well. And so veterans don't feel like they're hurt. They don't feel like people take them seriously. I mean, I just took on a veteran client recently who was saying, I can't get help at the VA because they said talk therapy doesn't work. So they're not doing any of that. And they said, you could go to this 6-week class and then that 6-week class, and then you'll be okay. And he's like, I've been struggling with this for over a decade. And I'm like, I get what you're saying. I get it. And so it's a common theme for a lot of veterans. Am I the reason for this, or is the military? Now, I will say, even if it's the military creates this, it is up to the individual if they want to continue that or if they want to get help. So, and that's the catch-22 as well, because the military also said, don't get fucking help. So it's like,
yeah,
it's really this gray area. Like, can you blame the veteran? Like, back in the 2000s, when we had like the double O's, when we had veterans who had severe post-traumatic breaks and then they would go around shooting people, was that the veteran or was that the military and the lack of mental health that they were giving those people? It's a gray area right there.
Yeah.
I know that's not quite going out and having problematic sexual behaviors, but it really makes you wonder who's responsible for this. And,
yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, you could look at somebody who's like acting out of their pain and we can say, yeah, the person should not have shot those people. Like, yeah, definitely. Right. But we could also recognize, like, I mean, nobody does anything like that out of a context or for no reason. And so, like you're saying, I mean, soldiers, they're trained to be soldiers, to be weapons, to be killers, to not be human. And so, yeah, if we don't unteach them that, or if we don't help them like unlearn that, then I mean, what did you think would happen? You turn these people loose. Yeah. So I mean, a person can't be, but well, I shouldn't say that. I was gonna say a person can't be what they are, except I don't completely believe that's true, because I do believe people can change. But people also
change. I will say that people are able to change.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of support. You're not going to change on your own, period. Yeah. I don't care how many self-help books you do. You're going to need that support of people around you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yes, the terrible things we do have a context, and the healing that we're able to achieve also has a context, and this whole supportive tradition around it. And that really needs to be a factor. Yeah.
And another thing is, Americans are absolutely horrible at this, but it's family life. We are so nuclear with, it's two people in a family and then maybe kids, and then that's it. Sometimes we'll go and we'll meet friends periodically, or sometimes we'll see family, but we don't necessarily have that larger community that other countries do. And we're seeing more mental health issues because we're no longer in that larger community environment getting help from so many people. We're isolating ourselves, which is leading to acting out with pornography, acting out with dating apps, acting out with websites where you can go and send messages to women, and like paid messages and stuff like that. I mean, it makes it, and I say that because I deal with male clients. There are also women who do similar things. But the isolation is really what does it. And in the military life, as soon as you're done training with everybody, you're basically let to do what you want to do. And most people are like, okay, I just need to either go back to my room and just take some time to myself, or I'm going to go to the bar and fucking drink myself stupid. And that's typically what happens.
Yeah. I really appreciate that note on community. Whenever I've talked to my friends who have been in the military, they all talk about how, despite the dehumanization of the training, there's a camaraderie, there's a brotherhood, a sisterhood there that is, nearly unparalleled anywhere else. Add some trauma, stress bonding in there too. So I can imagine, now the war's over, the stress is over, and I'm also stepping away from this super, super kindred group. Yep. And now I have to rebond with this other group that doesn't have any of my shared experiences, exactly. and be nice to them. And again, not impossible, but it's like that's a super steep learning curve. And
it is. Yeah.
That just sounds really difficult.
Yeah. It is a common theme with many veterans.
Yeah. Because
that camaraderie is second to none. You almost die together. You train for war together. You're there for each other. You lose a friend in your unit or in an adjacent unit to yours that you all knew, and you bond over that loss. And then you leave the military and you're not with those people all the time. Yeah, it is a thing.
Yeah. So the way that you kind of introduced this conversation was, I'm kind of hearing it initially as here's a observation. So this thing's happening. A lot of armed forces, a lot of veterans, they struggle with these really problematic sexual behaviors, problematic porn use, in addition to problematic drug use and anger and things like that. But recognizing, do they have pre-existing challenges that got exacerbated by the military? Did the military cause the problems, make the problems worse? Did our governmental political system further make it worse by...
We'll not get into that one.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a big tangent, and somebody ought to invest some time on that. But I feel like kind of the way I'm hearing it is there's this really big puzzle about like where we could distribute blame, for sure. But it does seem like kind of the more functional move on from there is more of like, okay, but so the thing happened. Now who's responsible? Who's responsible to fix it?
Yeah, I kind of want to. I want to respond to that real quick. We could talk all day long about who's to blame. We could do that. We could say, okay, government, you're at fault because you created the military, and then military, you're at fault because you created this. Or we could go, hey, you who joined the military, you're at fault because you didn't fix your shit before you got into the military, and it exacerbated because you had to be this way in the military. Or we could blame everybody and be like, oh, it's all your fault. It's Hollywood. Hollywood, it's your fault because of all those movies and TV shows glorifying war and all this shit.
It's video games. It's all video games.
Yeah, video games. I mean, we're basically indoctrinating our kids into this. And so we could point the blame at everybody, but really that's not going to solve shit. What's going to solve stuff is helping people get better and working so that we identify why it's happening so we can work to minimize it happening. It's still going to happen because war is... I would not want war on my worst enemy. I mean, it will take the nicest person and change them completely. I do not want anyone to go through war or go through any of the experiences I did. Like, if I have a family member who, like, these would be like, those much younger than me at this point, but if they're like, hey, we want to join the military, I'd be like, no, you don't. I'd be like, take it from me. No, you don't. It's not as glorified. It's not as glorified as you think it is. But we really need to work on helping people and identifying how we can minimize it happening in the future is really what we need to do. So right now we're looking at over 1 million people in the US easy who have actually it's like 5% of the general population. There's like 320 something million, I believe. So, I mean, yeah, we're looking at millions of people in the US, civilian, and then veteran. That's over 30 million right there, easy. I mean, that's closer to 50 million, right? Yeah, probably over 50 million veterans who have problematic sexual behaviors. If we just look at statistic-wise, that's a lot of people that need help. And we both went through the certified sex addiction therapist training. There's how many CSATs? 1,000, maybe?
Yeah, not 1 million. Definitely not.
Yeah, definitely not. Like, our caseload, if we worked with just even the civilian population, we wouldn't have enough CSATs to work with just the civilian population.
Yeah.
And like, I've tried to work with therapists in the past with like my own problematic sexual behaviors. And I mean, I had a VA therapist throw her hands up, look in abject fear going, oh, I can't help you with that. I need to refer you out. And it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And my experience is not isolated. there's others that have that same experience. And there are therapists that I talk to in communities that I work with, like civilian side, and they're like, I don't know how you do it. I could not work with anybody like that. And they have such horrible preconceived notions of these people are absolutely horrible because they cheated on their spouse, or they look at pornography, or they all have to be pedophiles. And I'm like, well, what's a pedophile to you? And they're like, oh, well, somebody who's not 18. I'm like, well, actually, a pedophile is prepubescent. So you don't even know the correct vernacular for what you're trying to talk about.
Whoops.
And, that pretty much bursts their bubble, but they still won't work with the population. And so really getting rid of that stigma is probably the number one thing we need to do, is get rid of it. And so I always try to help my clients, and anyone I talk to about it, I'm like, look, yeah, you're going to feel like shit. You're going to feel horrible for what you did. You're going to be like, why did I do that? Like, I am not that person. It's like, I get it. Feel that shame, feel that remorse, because we don't want you to do that again. But now we need to transcend it. And we need to make you say, all right, I did do those things. Now it's time to move on. But then that also goes to somebody who's changed and has years of change under their belt. Can we still really punish them for what they did? Which is also a gray area, because you could take somebody who was acting out, and we're going combat veteran here, who went through war and just had the worst post-traumatic stress possible, traumatic brain injuries. So we see that helps heighten the amygdala, which is the center for sex. And they go out and have tons of promiscuous sex. They might say things to get individuals to sleep with them, knowing full well they didn't mean anything. They just were trying to get out of their head. Can we blame them for doing all of that if they've made all these changes and they're like, look, I regret what I did. I'm no longer that person. But they still live in fear every day of, will my past come back to haunt me? So it's helping those people try to move through all of that fear that they have while they're in recovery, because once they get into recovery and they really see what they've done, they're like, oh my God, I did do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I have so many clients that I've worked with that have been in situations like that. It's like, yeah, you're going to live in fear the rest of your life just because the way the world works. But what I can be happy for is you're no longer that person. And you're not going to be that person again because you feel horrible. Like, you could put someone to jail for something they've done, but I guarantee you they're doing worse to themselves in their mind than jail's ever going to do to them.
Yeah, this is my experience of everyone who lives with chronic shame. Is their inner punishers are really vicious, and
exactly.
And this is my internal family systems. Therapists coming out saying so that an inner critic, inner punisher is probably trying to help and has some good intent. Maybe he's saying like, hey, wrong was done. We recognize the wrong. Good for you. Now something needs to be done with that wrong. What do we do? And the reflex is, well, maybe we got to punish it. So we'll just like punish, and hopefully that will fix something.
Right.
And that comes from some places. But what I'm discovering, it sounds like maybe you're discovering this too, is that like punishment isn't actually healing. It doesn't actually fix anything.
Correct.
Better to say, and this shows up in a lot of spiritual traditions too, is like, punishing a person for their sins doesn't help. Helping the person to now do rightly, that helps. Right. Teaching someone to practice virtues, to practice love and compassion, like that, right. That helps. Yeah. And so being able to help a person recognize, hey, you did wrong. Okay, I did wrong. And now come be with us, be in our community, and now do right. We'll help you do right. Would be better.
I agree. Yeah. It's working with compassion. Now, if somebody's still acting out and still doing the stuff that they're doing, yeah, I'm in full agreement. Okay. Yeah. Help them, like punish them because they're not making the effort to be better. But somebody who's making that effort and is sincere, that's key. If they're sincere about that, then yes, welcome in, welcome to the community so that they can feel the love, the compassion, and real growth and real recovery can fully happen at that point.
Yep. So a pair of questions to kind of go out with. So if you so kind of last words, both to say there's a clinician who has not previously worked with veterans and or has not previously worked with sexual behaviors. I guess what sort of advice, encouragement, wisdom would you offer them? And then to the service member in any role who is serving or has served, who's kind of recognizing, oh, sheesh, I've got some problems too. What your final thoughts to them too?
Yeah. So we'll start with the clinician. So if you're a clinician listening to this, hey, congratulations. It's a great podcast. If you're considering helping veterans, or if you're considering helping specifically veterans with problematic sexual behaviors, there's an organization to do volunteer therapy work, giveanhour.org. And it might be a good place to start because you're not going to be inundated with veterans trying to get pro bono services or anything. But you could just do one pro bono client and really work with that individual to hear what they are struggling with and what it's taken for them to get to you. And then in working with that individual, see, is this a population I want to work with? Now, if anything we talked about in this podcast really turns your stomach, just avoid the veteran population, period. Just avoid it. Or if you think that all life is sacred and so no one should die, you should probably avoid the veteran population because they will trigger you with their talk of killing people or watching friends die or anything death related. They will upset you. Now, if you want to go with the problematic sexual behavior aspect, maybe start with the non-veteran population and then go to the veteran population if you're able to stomach that, because it kind of is a different beast, because you're not just dealing with I got this work stress or this perfectionism that my parents put on me, and so now that manifests through problematic sexual behaviors with acting out. You're dealing with trauma, like mass. And I'm not saying civilians don't have trauma, because someone can be raped and then they act out trying to reclaim their sexual health again. That's not everybody. That's just a small segment. I'm just giving examples. But the veterans, you're going to be dealing with lots of trauma, lots of shame, lots of guilt, the objectification and the depersonalization, especially the depersonalization. So if you're not able to handle that, don't go and do it. But if you're like, no, this is the population I want to work with, these are who I want to help, I'm all good with this, and I like the more challenging clients, because I will tell you, combat veterans will be a more challenging client than most you're going to deal with. If you're interested in that, go and get training. Like, we both have the certified sex addiction therapist credentialing. Go and do that. It's about a year-long training, but worth it. And so go get that training and start helping people. Now, if you're a veteran and you're like, oh, crap, a lot of this resonated with me. Yeah, maybe I do need help. My advice would be to just do a search for CSATs in your area, CSAT, or Charlie, Sierra, Alpha Tango. Angle, I don't know where the hell that came from. But yeah, do a search for those in your area and then just reach out to them, see if they're taking clients and how you can work with them. You can also, like, myself. If you're interested in working with me, I tend to do more coaching than I do therapy. And as a coach, I can actually see anybody anywhere in the world, whereas therapy, I can only see you if you're in one of the 4 states I'm licensed. And so if you're like, no, I think the coaching is more the aspect I want to go, because you're going to focus on me and not necessarily, the problem that we're seeing, because I know it resolves with me. You can reach out to me as well, and just go to my website, mindaligned.com. And, I'd be more than happy to just do a consultation session with you. And if we're not a good fit, I'd be like, hey, we're not a good fit, but why don't you go and check out psychologytoday.com, or, check out Rye's website. And, I would rather provide a way to get better than just say, we can't work together, and that be it. But yeah, if you are a veteran, just search for a CSAT, reach out to me, reach out to Rise. And yeah, that would be my suggestion. You're not alone. There's a lot out there like you, and you don't have to remain the way you are. It will get better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got. Well, I mean, I got way more than that, but
right.
For time purposes,
yeah,
we'll keep it at that.
That's a good dose. Yeah, no, I love that. It will get better, and you're not alone. Like you said, there's at least 1 million other people going through similar things and similar challenges. And
Well, that's just the civilian population.
That's just civilian. Like, okay.
Close to 17 million.
Okay.
Or no, times 3. Well, yeah, we're talking like tens of millions of veterans going through this.
Right. So lots of people. You're not alone. Yeah. So yeah, definitely reach out. Conrad's there at mindaligned.com. If you're in Oregon, you can look up my website, www.newpatterncounseling.com. That's one pattern, singular, newpatterncounseling.com. Or looking up CSATs, whether through Psychology Today or through the ITAP website. That's iitap.com. Since we're plugging things again, if this particular podcast YouTube is useful for you, or you think it might be useful for a friend, please like, share, rate, review, all that. You can drop us a few dollars at patreon.com/outer circle. That helps me do this more. And yeah, there's support. There's a way out. There is hope. It's a lot of work, but it's well worth it. And again, to all the service members out there, thank you again for what you do and going through what you did. And as best as we can help you come back, we want you back.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we will be back soon with more fun thoughts, fun concepts,